Hey guys, how you doing today? I want to give you guys some winter tips for your houseplants, and it's just going to be pretty general information, nothing crazy, but just things that I think are important for wintertime, especially in my area. I live in Ohio, so we get really cold here. Lots of cold, lots of snow, lots of rain, and a lot of wind. So, number one, I have 10 tips, by the way, but the first thing I like to do with my houseplants is, if I have houseplants outside, like on my front porch or my back patio, my back porch, I like to start bringing plants in early. I don't wait till the last minute to start doing that. I like to take my time. And I want to do it, well, what I think about it is, if you bring them in a little bit earlier, before it starts getting cold, and your weather is really changing dramatically, like you get really hot days and then really cold nights, if you bring them in a little bit before that, they adjust a lot better to coming in the home, I have learned. And I've been growing houseplants for like 40 years. And so just over my time of growing, I have learned that if I bring them in like a month or a month and a half-ish before the weather starts really changing dramatically in the fall, the plants do adjust a lot better after you bring them in. But what I usually do is, before I start bringing them in, I take my hose, I shower them all down, get the leaves nice and clean. I wet down my soil and I drench it. I drench it all out. That way, if there's anything in it, like I have a huge problem. We have a lot of frogs here and toads, a lot of tree frogs, and I have brought frogs into my house. And they're cute and everything, but I want them to stay outside, obviously, and they need time to hibernate. But so I do a huge soil drench with my hose. I water it and just let the water just pour through continuously. And then I like to, I use neem oil for everything. Fungal issues, pest issues. I will spray all my plants down really good with my neem oil. After that initial drench, let everything dry after you've sprayed everything off with the hose. Or after I've sprayed everything off with the hose. Let that dry down. Do it on a kind of a windy day and you'll get it done a lot quicker. And then spray everything down really good with neem oil. Get your fronts, your backs of your leaves, your stems, and then I pour a bunch of neem down into my soil. Let that all sit, let everything dry really good. And over the next couple of days, I start bringing my plants in. And I get them put where I want them, and, you know, adjust everything accordingly to winter light. But I move my plants around all the time, so, you know, I constantly change my plants around. And then, of course, you know, if something needs to be repotted, I repot it if it's super root bound. So that's usually my first step in bringing my plants in. And if you don't have plants, if you don't take plants outside, then you don't have to worry about that step. And then, the second thing I usually do is, if you have hardwood floors, linoleum, anything like that, and you have really cold floors in the wintertime, like if you can't walk around without your slippers on or your shoes on, and your feet are cold, your plants are going to be cold. Especially when it starts getting really cold outside. So I use, you know, the plant risers, or you can use other pots that you have. You can flip them upside down and set your plants up on top of that, and then put your drip tray on top of your plant riser, and then put your plant on top of that. Because if your floors are cold and you have your plants sitting directly on the floor, your soil is going to get cold, your roots are going to get cold, and then when you go to water them, you could end up with some plant issues. You could have root rot. Your plant could just go crazy and lose a bunch of leaves. You want to be very mindful not to keep your plants sitting directly on the floor. I've even, a couple of times when I've run out of plant risers or a certain pot that I needed that I couldn't find to raise my plant up, I just take an old towel and like fold it and set it on top of that towel for the winter, and it works. You're keeping it off the direct cold floor. So tip number 3 is, if you have a cold, drafty room and you have cold, drafty windows in cold climates, like here in my living room, I have one southern window, I have 2 west windows, and I have a north window. And it gets really cold in here. Plus, we have a basement that is not heated, so it doesn't help keep our floors warmer. But I have old, drafty windows. So I am a little bit mindful where I will pull my plants back a little bit from my windows, and if you have heavier curtains that you could put up, blinds. Now I have vertical blinds on my windows that I can close when it gets really, really cold, so that's helpful. You don't want, I don't put any plants directly in my windowsill in the winter. If I have anything in my windowsills, I take them off, because you will end up getting some damage from that. I have learned the hard way, and especially if you have drafty windows, or your leaves are touching the window, you will get cold damage on those plants. So make sure you move your plants off the windowsills. I already talked about pulling them away from, just take your table or your plant stand and just pull it a little bit away from your window. A half a foot, whatever you think is best. You can kind of keep an eye on your plant and see. But I keep my shears closed all the time in the summer and in the winter. But if it gets really cold, I'll pull my blinds, and it helps keep that cold from drafting over right onto your plants, because a cold draft will do a lot of damage to your plant. Your leaves can fall off your plant. It will just cause havoc on your plants. And tip number 4 is grow lights. Now, like for me, yeah, I have a lot of windows, but in the winter time, you're not getting the same amount of light that you do in the summertime, obviously. So, if you have a dark corner, and say, you need more room for your plants because they've either gotten bigger, or, you've accumulated more plants, and you don't quite have room for everything, when you have a dark corner, grow lights are great. You can supplement the lighting, you can use it full time, like I do out in my kitchen. On my back counter, I have Hoyas back on my back counter, and I have to turn those lights on every single day, because there's no other light getting to them from that window, from that area at all. But then I have other grow lights that I use, like here in my living room right now I have my lights on for the video. But now what I usually do is I have grow lights set up everywhere, but I don't turn them on first thing of the day. Like all my plants that are right in front of a window, I let them soak in the daylight. And then later on in the day, like around 4 o'clock, I'll turn my grow lights on, and then I'll leave my grow lights on until about 9 o'clock at night. So, you know, if you have like a north window, or just a very unlit corner, or you just want to supplement a little bit of extra light, that's great. And that's primarily how I use my grow lights, is for supplemental lighting later in the day and then on through the night, because it gets dark here. Like right now, it's a little before 7 o'clock, and pretty soon it's going to be like 5:30. So I've got my lights on timers, and I have them come on about 4 o'clock, and then they shut off about 9 o'clock. So, and then from morning until 4 o'clock, they're just getting natural light through the windows. For the ones that are in front of the windows. I have other areas in my home, like I said before, where I turn them on in the morning, and then they're on till about 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night. And you want your plants in the summertime, if you're using grow lights, you know, a 12-hour light is good. You can do 12, you can do 14, you know, whatever. But I pretty much stick with about 12. And my plants do really good over the winter time with that 12-hour light cycle. I don't want to have to run my electricity, run my lights, even though, you know, our grow lights and our LED lights and stuff that we use, or excuse me, our LED bulbs, they are a lot cheaper, but I still don't want to have to run my grow lights all the time. That's just extra money spent, and your plants really, really don't need 14, 16 hours of light, in my opinion. That's my opinion. Like I said, my plants do very, very well in 12 hours. A lot of my grow lights have timers, and some of them don't. I think I figured the other day to get all of my lights on timers. I think I need 2 more. I think I need to get 2 more timers, so I'm not having to worry about turning lights off and on. But which is no big deal. I've got my harder lights where I really have to reach really big or try to pull plants away to turn lights on. I have those all on timers, so that's a great plus with using plant timers for our lights too. I love that. So yeah, I have my timers set to go off between, usually at 9, but sometimes it kind of changes. You know, it can be 9:30. The plant timers aren't perfect, but they're better than having to move 50 million things to try to get your timers off, or your lights off and on. So, let's see here. Tip number 5, and this is something that really irritates me that I hear so many other people talk about, is feeding your plant, whether or not to feed or not feed your plants in the winter. I hear almost everybody say, don't do it. Not to feed your plants in the wintertime. And those of you that have been watching me for a while know that I do not agree with that. And there's a couple other things later that I don't agree with that we'll get to later. But fertilization, I'm sorry, you need to fertilize your plants in the wintertime. Now, if you have plants that go dormant, like I have a couple that go completely dormant, like my amaryllis bulbs, my Slissus discolor vine, she goes dormant in the wintertime, so as soon as she starts dying back in the wintertime, which is usually about January, February, it kind of depends, then I stop watering her, I stop feeding her. That's just kind of a given. It's a common sense. You have to use common sense. But your plants are still sucking in light. You're still watering them. They need to have food. If they're growing, they need to have food. And they are growing in the wintertime. Especially if you're using grow lights and you're having that 12 to 14 hour light, like in the summertime, and you're having that same kind of a lighting in the wintertime, you have to feed your plants. You have to continue to feed your plants like you do in the summertime. Once a month is great in the wintertime. So, please, feed your plants in the winter. You can't not feed them because you're going to have stagnated leaves. They're going to be small. You're not going to have root growth. You're not going to have leaf growth if you stop watering. If they're still getting the same amount of light, or they're still getting light, period, your plants are going to grow. You have to feed them. It just doesn't make any sense to not feed your plants in the wintertime. Unless you know for sure you have plants that does not grow in the wintertime, you know, or go dormant in the wintertime for sure, like the couple plants that I mentioned. Yeah. Don't feed them. Because you're not barely giving them any water either, so why feed them when they're going dormant or when they are dormant? But that irritates me so much when plant growers tell you do not feed plants in the wintertime. It just makes no sense to me. Okay, watering. I hear a lot of people, this is something else that kind of irritates me, a pet peeve. I hear so many people say in the wintertime that either say, you don't have to water your plants in the wintertime because they're not growing as much, blah, blah, blah. Please do not water your plants. You have to water your plants. You might have to water some less often. Like I have big plants in big pots. I do not have to water those plants that often in the summertime or in the wintertime. Because it's a bigger pot, which retains more water. And, I mean, unless your root system is just totally root bound. But you can tell. Just, all you have to do is pick your plant up to see if it needs to be watered. All plants don't need to be watered on the same day. I have pots that can go 3-4 days longer or even a week longer than I do some of my other plants. It depends on what you have your plants in. I mean, if you're using terracotta, that pot is going to dry it a lot quicker than a plastic pot. And no matter if it's a little 3-inch pot or a 12-inch pot, terracotta is going to dry out a lot quicker. And it also depends on what kind of medium you're using. If you've got a lot of bark and a lot of perlite in your pot, that plant is going to dry out a lot quicker. You just have to be mindful that, now, if you have a plant in a lower light situation, it's obviously not going to need as much water. Because the more light that your plant is using and taking in, the more water it's using. The more water that is being absorbed by the roots. But you still, in the wintertime, you're running heat. I mean, most of us are. You're running heat every day, which is still drying your plants out because the heat's running. And you got fans running, ceiling fans or a floor fan. It's still going to dry your plants out. It might be a little less frequent than summertime, but you still have to make sure that you're paying attention to your plants' watering needs and feeding needs, which go hand in hand. So tip number 7, humidity. Now, I do run humidifiers in my house. I run one in my living room, and I run one in my plant room. I don't have humidifiers in my kitchen or dining room where I have plants also. But, for my health, personally, and I think it's important for everybody's health, especially in the wintertime when you're running your heaters, no matter what kind of heaters you're running, whether it's propane heat or natural gas or wood burning, stoves, etc., the air can get very, very dry. And, especially like if you have a lot of sinus issues or, anything like that, you want to have a little bit of humidity in your house. 40 to 50% is healthy for you, for your skin, for your breathing, for your sinuses, and for your plants. So it's great. Now I keep my humidifiers going, and I run mine between about 50 and 60%. I try not to let it get any lower, and lower than 50, and I try not to let my humidity go above 60. But you know, sometimes that's really hard to do because, like, if you get a lot of rain, if you get a lot of wet snow, the humidity automatically rises outside, so it's automatically rising or lowering in your house. So you're either going to have to put your humidifier on a lower setting or turn it off. You know, I've had to turn my humidifiers off a lot. Like, it's been raining for almost 24 hours here, and I was able to shut my humidifiers off in my house completely because of the rain and the humidity getting in the house, which, that's great. One less thing I have to worry about, and I don't have to keep an eye on my humidifiers. But, okay, what was I talking about? Oh, not all plants have to have high humidity. So, you know, you don't have to go crazy and, you know, run a bunch of humidifiers or run a humidifier, because, I mean, when you think about it, you know, if you have a lot of plants together in one area, they're kind of creating their own little humidity environment right there all around. So your plants are probably going to be okay. And the majority of common house plants that you're going to buy don't really need a whole lot of humidity. It's more the tropicals, like, you know, your anthuriums and alocasias and stuff like that, that really do need to have more humidity. And I have all those plants, but I still don't go over 60%. And my plants, those kind of plants that I have, do fine. I don't know how other people can do it when they have like 80% or higher humidity. I am so afraid to get mold in my house and bacteria and fungus issues on my plant that I won't do it. I won't go above 60. You can also put plants in your bathroom. You know, like if you have really nice lighting, or can put a grow light in your bathroom. A bathroom is a great source of humidity for a plant. And, you know, you're taking showers every day, you're in there, you know, even if you're not turning your shower on every day, you can turn your shower on for a couple of minutes and, you know, it will produce some humidity in that room for your plant. So a bathroom is a nice place. You can also mist your plants if you need to. You can give them a little mist every couple days or whatever. That does a lot of good, but you want to be careful if you are running a humidifier or if you are misting. You want to make sure that you have really, really good airflow, which goes into number 8 on my tips. Is that if you are misting your plants or you're running a humidifier, even if you're not running a humidifier, it's important that your plants have airflow, especially if you're watering a whole bunch of plants in one day. You know, run your fan for a little while. But if you're running a humidifier and you're running it all the time, day and night, it's really, really important that you have a fan running. Like in here, I have a fan up on one of my high shelves. I have it pointing up towards the ceiling. I'll try to get a picture of it and put it in. I have it pointing up towards the ceiling because I don't have a ceiling fan on this room. And then it hits the ceiling and it blows my hot air down, but it also blows air down onto my plants so they have some air movement. And you can probably see in the video here that my plants are moving. I mean, it's not crazy moving. You know, it's not like I got a floor fan on full blast. in the winter time in here, because God, I'd freeze to death for number one. But you want to have some air movement. If you don't, you are going to have fungal issues and bacterial issues on your plants. And you can also, if you're running a humidifier and you're running a crazy high humidity, and even at 60%, you can grow mold. Mold could form on your walls, on your furniture. You don't want that to happen. That could be very dangerous. You don't want to be breathing that in. But you also don't want fungal issues and bacterial issues on your plants if you're running a humidifier. You want to be very careful of that. So it's very, very important to run a fan and have some kind of airflow for your plants. Your plants like to have air. Even if you're not running a humidifier, your plants need to move around and have some airflow. Okay, so number 9. Throughout the winter, you want to keep an eye and be mindful of if you see that plants aren't doing well. Maybe they don't have enough light, maybe they're not getting enough water, maybe they're getting too much water. Every area in my house is different in the summertime and in the wintertime. I have a couple of rooms that stay really warm. Like we run a propane fireplace in the dining room. Our dining room is really, really warm. But in here in my living room, with all the west window and the north windows, and we get really cold here. I have old drafty windows. We get a lot of wind in the wintertime. It can get really cold in here. So you want to be careful, and you're going to have all your lighting is going to change in the winter. Your lighting is different in the spring, in the summer, in the fall, in the winter. Every season changes with lighting. And if you've got houseplants, you need to figure that out for your area and what you have, because you might have a big, beautiful southern window or a western window that gets, and you're thinking, oh, well, they're saying they grow theirs in a west light, but you could have a big tree out there in the way that's shading. You could have bushes, you could have whatever, but your lighting is going to change throughout the winter. So if you see, like you put a plant somewhere and you thought it was going to be okay, and then it's looking kind of whacked out, figure out, okay, am I underwatering it? Am I overwatering it? Is it getting enough light? Or does it have pests? You want to figure that stuff out, and then move your plant. Maybe move it into a southern window, or move it under a grow light. Keep it. You can move your plants around. Don't be afraid to move your plants around. I move my plants around all the time. I love it. And I like to get my plants looking a certain way, especially here in my living room where me and my husband live. I mean, I want my living room to look really nice. I mean, I want my plant room to look nice too, but I'm not that concerned about it in my plant room, because I'm usually the only one that sees my plant room. Well, besides you guys, but I want my plants to look nice. I want them, but sometimes what we want for aesthetic reasons just does not work for our plants. So don't be afraid to move your plants around. And find a different spot for them if they're looking crazy and you're thinking they're not getting enough light. And like my issue in here in my living room is, on a really cold, windy day, my living room can get pretty cold. So, like, I might have to move a plant from this room into my dining room or into my plant room, because those rooms are warming. And I'm okay with that. I might not like it because I want that plant out here, but it's about what our plants need more than it is what we need, even though we want to have that plant in a room where we're at the most to be able to see it. So yeah, your room might be too cold. It may not be enough light. Or, you know, it could be too hot. But you might find that you may need to put a grow light in an area where you thought was going to be enough light. Or maybe you're just like me and you have too many plants and you have to put a plant in a lower light area and then put a grow light up because your plant just is not going to get enough light where you need to have plants because you've got too many plants. Or they're just too big. Crazy. But, so, don't be afraid to put a grow light up. I know they're not the greatest looking. I don't like to have them, especially in my living room, because I don't want to be blinded all day by grow lights. So I try to do minimal grow lights in my living room, which is why I do not turn my grow lights on until later in the day, about 4 o'clock, and then let them run until about 9. That's about all I can take of it. I do not like having grow lights in my living room. They're blinding. They're not natural. I like natural light look. I hate to have grow lights in my living room, but I use them because of my plants. My plants need them, especially in certain areas where I have plants that are, where I have to have plants and it's a darker area. Because let's face it, I've just got a lot of plants. So I can't cram all my plants in front of a window. But that's a whole different subject right there. So yeah, just be mindful of that. You might have to switch some plants around. Have fun with it. Don't stress about it. Just have fun with it. Move some plants around and enjoy. Enjoy your plants. Don't freak out about every little thing. Just use your common sense with your plants, and I think you'll be a lot better off, you know, if you just let common sense come into play and figure out that they need more light, or they need more water, or they need less water, they need food, you know. Just use your common sense and keep a really good eye on your plants. That's the best advice I can give you. I mean, you don't have to be a helicopter parent and look at your plants really good every single day and, you know, take 3 hours to go around and look at all your plants. Just, if you see drooping, if you see a bunch of yellowing leaves all at one time, you know, 1 or 2 yellowing leaves is no big deal. Don't freak out about it. But, I mean, if you see a lot of stuff going on all at one time, okay, you need to figure out what's going on with that plant. But just use your common sense. If it isn't doing well, move it. Or change your watering habits. Feed it. You know, I mean, but, and this is the last thing, tip number 10 for me, and this is another really huge pet peeve for me, is everybody tells you do not, oh my god, whatever you do, just like feeding, don't feed your plants in the winter. They say, don't repot your plants in the winter time. Guys, that is such an old wives' tale. I don't get that. Those of you that have been watching me, you know that is my favorite time to repot my plants. If I have the plants that need to be repotted, I do it in the winter time. Because I'm going to tell you what right now, it makes no sense to me that your plants are in the house, you're not outside in 20 degree weather. I don't get that concept. I've been growing plants for 40 years. And if you want to count when I was a little kid, because my mom has house plants, she has always had house plants. I've seen my mom repot everything in the wintertime. She'd take them down in the basement and do it. It's cold down there. I don't understand where this concept comes from. And I totally 100% don't agree with it. You can repot your house plants in the winter. I don't get it. I'm sorry. I know a lot of you are probably going to disagree with me about that, but let's just agree to disagree. I'm telling you, I repot my house plants all the time in the winter time, and I do not have issues from it. It just makes no sense to me. I mean, I guess this is how I think about it, is if you have a plant that's fruit bound, and it's January, or December, or whatever, and you ask somebody, and they're telling you, oh my God, no, don't repot that plant, wait till spring. Well, if your plant is root bound, and you don't repot it and take care of it and put it into a bigger pot, you're going to have more issues come spring, because your plant is going to suffer. If it's root bound, your plant is suffering, and it needs to go into a bigger pot so that it can have more soil and more nutrients. I've had root bound plants, and if you've ever unpotted a really root bound plant, I mean, it's like they eat their soil. So even though if you're watering it all the time, it has no nutrients to absorb from the soil, because when you're fertilizing your plant, you're pouring your food down into the soil, which in return your roots are absorbing the water and the nutrients from the soil. So if it doesn't have any soil to absorb water from, you can water that plant and water that plant and water that plant, and yeah, it might touch a few roots here and there, but I've had spider plants that I've killed because I haven't repotted them when I should have, because they were so root bound. You have to. It's just like if your plant gets pest issue, like say you have a really big mealybug outbreak, or thrips, or spider mites, you need to spray that plant down and take care of it. I mean, if it's a really, really bad outbreak, my opinion is, and what I do is, I repot the whole plant. I take all the soil off, I clean the roots off, and I spray that whole plant down, the leaves, front and back, the stems, the roots, everything. Let it sit and dry out really good, and then repot it into fresh soil. So, you know, common sense does more when you have plants than it does trying to listen to a bunch of people that, I'm sorry, to me it just doesn't make sense. If your plant needs to be repotted in the winter, I don't care if you're having a snowstorm. I mean, as long as you haven't lost electricity and your house is like 30 or 40 degrees, no, don't repot your plant. I mean, that's just crazy. Common sense, once again, comes into play. But you've got normal temperatures in your house. You know, you're looking at 60, 70 degree temperatures in your house. It's not going to hurt your plant. So, you know, if you absolutely need to repot your plant, repot it. Even if it doesn't need absolutely repotted and you want to repot it, repot it. It doesn't matter. I've never, ever, in the 40 years I've been growing plants, I've never had an issue with repotting a plant in the wintertime unless it's had another whole totally different issue, like root rot, or a bad pest issue, or a fungal issue. Yeah, you might lose that plant, but it's not going to be because you repotted it. It's going to be because of a different issue that you were previously having before you repotted it. I mean, that to me just, it blows my mind away. I hear everybody say it, and I just sit here and roll my eyes. I don't never say nothing. I don't argue the fact, because I'm not an argumentative person. I don't want to argue with people. I like to have discussions, but, you know, it just is common sense that if your plant needs to be repotted, repot it. Period. I mean, you're going to do more damage to a plant that is suffering by letting it continue to suffer all winter long, or for a couple more months, than what you are going to do. Your plant is going to be so much happier if you just pick her up, drop her in a bigger pot, put some fresh soil on it, and water and feed her. She's going to be so much happier than waiting and waiting and waiting for spring to get here. So another just, you know, common sense type of thing. But, okay, I've had my rant. I gave you guys my tips that I do for my plants in the wintertime. And I'm going to cut this video off. Thank you guys all for watching, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye. Peace.